Hi everyone, I'm Tim Von Rieden and welcome to our weekly CG Cookie live stream. As we get started here, I'm going to finish pushing out the marketing agenda and then I'm going to announce some news before we get into drawing heads from different poses. It was requested on our request forum on our community site, which you can click below if you have a suggestion of your own. And for once, we're actually starting on time. I'm really excited about that. Okay, so before we begin, let me just share a few things that happened since last time I saw you guys. First one was my Kickstarter launched last week, and it was funded within 2 days, and I can't thank you guys enough, especially those that supported on the stream. You guys are awesome, and I'm glad that you guys were able to get the early bird pickup before anyone else, as those went within the first hour. So I'm glad that you guys were the first ones to be able to have that opportunity. And pretty much I think through the month of February, I'm going to be doing more traditional streams just to keep promoting it and keep the marketing alive for it for those that don't know anything about it or for those of you that may still want to pick it up. I put a link below that you can check that out as well. But the big news with CG Cookie that happened over the weekend was our contest finally launched on last Friday. And this is our Lemon Made, get it, contest. And it will run throughout February until I think I put the 28th. It's near the end, and then it will be announced the first Wednesday of March. The winners will be announced. So I'm pretty excited about this one. Our contests are always fun to see, and this time we actually partnered up with Coolorus. I don't know why I can't say that right, but it's the little wheel plugin for Photoshop that is a color wheel, and it's really great. I have a lot of friends that use it, and I'm excited to do a tutorial on how to use it correctly. And the winners will each be receiving one. And also, we have a few new guest judges as well for this time around. And I think there's a total of 7 of us that will be critiquing and looking over your work. And this is a great opportunity not only to obviously win some money, because we have cash prizes on there as well, but I think it's important for you guys to get feedback from people that are in the industry, people that have been doing art kind of as their career and have been doing so for a long time. And just that feedback, I believe, is more invaluable than the actual money prize. So for those of you that are interested, I would check that out below as well. And there's 3 other things. The first one was I thank you, Peapod the Pocket Squirrel, for following. Oh yeah, first, the fridge behind me, for those of you who don't know, we built a golden fridge. It's kind of an inside joke with us at CG Cookie Concept and our Twitch viewers. And if you want to get your magnet on the fridge, essentially, I have a link for that below as well. But I played Uncharted 2 this week, or Uncharted 4, I don't know why I said 2, over the weekend. And I rarely play video games, but I feel like the last 3 months I've played Last Guardian, Final Fantasy 15, and Uncharted 4. I don't like it to drag on long, so I try to beat it within 3-4 days. So I beat Uncharted 4 over the weekend, and by far best video game I've played in the past, I want to say 10-ish years. Like by far. I would say Splatoon comes close on a fun level, but in terms of art direction and everything that you would expect from a AAA title in a video game, I got, and then some. So if you guys are into those kind of, I'm not even that big into like Indiana Jones or first person shooter, or I guess it's a third person shooter game. I'm not even that big into it, but I fell in love, and especially the ending. It was such a good ending. So I feel like I need to promote how much of a experience I had with it and tell you guys that you should play it. And I started my 365 at the beginning of the year. I wanted to share my progress with you guys and show where I'm at. And essentially, me and all my roommates are doing this at Von House, where you're supposed to draw for every day, but I've fell a little bit behind because of my Kickstarter, but I'm catching up now. I have 10 more days I have to catch up on. So here is the full drawing. Essentially, it's a 2-foot canvas, and I'm working little by little, but as you can see, this one's a little tougher because I'm trying to draw on more of a minuscule level. I've never drawn this small before, and I want to get even little details like the trees behind the log cabin. And I'm trying to tell kind of a narrative story throughout this drawing. I'm not going to say what it is or what it's for, but just know I'm pretty excited for it. And 2 of my roommates already guessed what it is. So I was kind of bummed out. I thought it would take like till mid-year, but they already guessed. So I'll post updates on that later today as well. I have the 365 challenge somewhere below. And if you guys are interested in, you can start whenever, as long as it just takes you a year where you draw every day for a little bit. And I know I shouldn't be promoting it too much because I already fell behind and I'm catching up now. But I will definitely catch up. Okay. Now that we are officially, I think people are all joined in. So, hi everyone. Officially, welcome to the CG Cookie Concept live stream. We do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Time, and I usually post what we're doing an hour or two beforehand. And I love hearing suggestions from you guys, and that's what we're doing today. This one was from Brandon Griffin. He wanted to see heads being drawn at different angles. And I thought this was a great one because since I want to draw traditionally, I can talk about how I've kind of drawn heads when I was in college versus how I draw heads now. And they're definitely different, especially in how much of a difference between structured versus fluid. And I'll go into that more as we get started drawing here. So if you guys have any questions at all, please put at CG Cookie Concept in the comments, and I will make sure to look at it and answer any questions to the best of my ability. That's why we do these, and that's why I'm here. Okay, and the very last thing is throughout this stream, the thing that I've been working on starting this week is I'm creating a new Getting Started course for CG Cookie, and what I'm struggling with is trying to connect with someone that is just starting out in Photoshop. So if you guys have any suggestions or tips or advice on things, if you're newer to Photoshop or if there's things that you remember when you were first getting acquainted with the software, things that you either struggled with or things that you found very helpful when getting started. Like for me, finding out that I could change the keyboard shortcuts to the bottom left hand of my keyboard, that really helped me because then I changed my brush and my eraser and all my shortcuts to be in the bottom left corner. And I think just even being told that you should be using your left hand almost as much as your right hand when doing digital art, that was a huge thing for me to have to adapt and learn. So if there's anything that you guys felt like it was almost mandatory for you to learn when getting started in Photoshop, please let me know in the comment section, and I will take notes on that as I'm recording and doing these getting started tutorials. Okay, so let me see if there's any questions really quick. Kratos SVC says, isn't that a Swordplay story? Maybe, but I'm not going to say what exactly it is. CG Rifter says, seconded by... What seconded? Oh, okay. It seems like more people requested this. So I'm going to switch over here. Where's that button? There we go. Okay. I don't want to show you that first. Let me show you this. So when I was in school and I was learning how to draw the head, we were drawing very structurally. It was very much, here's the head in front view, side view, and we would learn the bones underneath the skeleton, the skull, the muscles on that would lay over it, and then how the skin would lay on top of that. Now, I actually found this invaluable, as I believe it's good to learn the fundamentals of how anything works, especially the human body if you want to be a character artist, and then you can kind of manipulate it and push it into your own style. But if you really don't understand how the head moves, how the muscles work together, and how the head actually animates, I feel like you're not able to translate that into your own style very well. Why, thank you, Rockin79, for following. So I believe it's important to understand how the muscles underneath the skin work. And I think that's why a lot of people always ask me, why do your stuff look so fluid when you draw characters? I think it's because I'm mostly focusing on the muscles underneath the skin, and I don't make it prominent. I make it very subtle. And I think it helped me in college was not like over exaggerating muscle structures and making it so rigid. Instead, make it more relaxed, more fluid, and have those little nuances in like the collarbone area, and maybe have that be more prominent than, let's say, the shoulder muscle. I think having an understanding of the muscle on any part of the skeleton is extremely important. But I think it's even more important on how you lay the skin over without the muscles being a distraction. I think if there's like a hint of muscle, I think then you nailed it. I think it's like the perfect look for drawing it. Because if it becomes too overpowered, unless if you're doing like superhero comics or something, then I can definitely understand. But I think if you're trying to just draw a normal character in the front pose or whatever pose you're putting them in, and having these very structural lines defining the muscle tones, I feel like that's the wrong way to go about it. So I do encourage and I urge everyone here to at least understand and learn the muscles. I know that this can be kind of a task in itself. And even I feel like I don't uh, understand the muscles completely, but I feel like I've gotten enough understanding to get away with some things, but that's not an excuse. And I really should continue picking up learning all the muscles of the body. Because once you kind of know where they are underneath the skin, you start drawing little nuances and little hints of it on top of your skin. Then that's when your characters really feel alive and like they have more of a structure to them than just an outline of a body. So please just use Google image search. There's so many online with muscle tissue and anatomy that I find this almost invaluable as a character artist to understand the human body and how it works. Okay. But my problem with this is when you become so structural in the way that you draw the human body, I feel like it's really hard for you to adapt to then turning the head and putting it in these positions that are irregular to you because you're so structured on the front view, side view, maybe 3/4, maybe. And it becomes then weird to think about the head moving or proportions moving or perspective even. And I think that's why a lot of artists struggle, is because we learn in such a rigid way that it's hard to break out of it then. So what I started doing in my life drawing classes, I don't know if I have any good examples on me right now. Oh, here we go. So what I would do is I would just be very short with my lines. It'd be very, not so much on the anatomy, but on the capturing the face and what makes each face unique. And that became kind of my goal whenever I was drawing. Well, I thank you, The Crow, for following. So this way, I think, is the way I most commonly go about it nowadays. But the way that I want you guys to experiment with is more of a, let me see if I have more of a fluid drawing in here. Not the best example, but something where you're allowing the lines to kind of capture the shapes that you see without it being perfect or 100% accurate to the anatomy. I think finding movement and having these kind of expressive lines within your work can create a much more interesting dynamic within the head. And the best part about drawing the human anatomy in terms of capturing it in your own style, there is no right way. The only thing that I would say, the only wrong thing that you can do is not at least experiment with other ways of going about drawing your characters or whatever it is actually. So in college, I would always draw very rigid and straight because that's how we were taught. And then it took my life drawing teacher to say, no, you need to keep your pencil on the page and be fluid, draw swoopy lines and be expressive with your gestures. And I think that's when I really started kind of coming into my own as figuring out how do I draw people. And I want to hopefully help you guys with that today. Because now whenever I do life drawings of people, especially from reference, I feel like I don't focus on how rigid the human study or the study that I went through in college. And I focus more on like the negative space or things of like maybe the shadows. I feel like I focus on less on making sure the proportions are 100% accurate and more of creating a more lifelike and human-like figure in the end result. And that's why I love drawing now people like this, where I used to I like had such an emphasis on eyes, but now I'm very much okay with just letting there be like a subtle eyelash line and let that capture the almost implying the eye, but not actually drawing like the entire eyeball, every single individual lash, just having it be there. Or I guess this would be a better example where I'm not drawing the eyes so much. And even this eye back there, it's kind of just one value tone, but it captures the figure's face much more well than if I try to actually drawing it precisely. So hopefully today I can kind of show you a few different examples and how I've kind of learned to draw my own heads and people in general. And today we're going to show how to draw heads at different angles. Let me see if I think there was one more thing I wanted to talk about first. Oh, using reference. I'm going to be taking pictures of myself in 3 poses because I believe you are the best walking reference that you can use as an artist. So why not use the most valuable asset that you have with you 24/7? But for those of you that like to use maybe external reference, I would even recommend buying a figure that is posable. And this is Noctis from Final Fantasy 15. But essentially, you can push and pull his head in whatever direction you are looking to capture and draw it almost as like a life drawing study, but from a figure. Now, I would even recommend getting one that doesn't have as much hair or things that are interfering with what you want to capture. There are these dolls called, they're called BJ dolls, but they're actually ball jointed dolls. And what that means is they're completely, like all their fingers, you can, well, not all of them, but most of them, you can like bend and edit each finger in whatever position you want it to be in. They're much more, I guess, editable. I don't think that's a word, but you can edit them more to an extent that you can with just a normal figure. And that is something that I'm hopefully investing in sometime this summer. And I really want to get a large one that I can put in these different poses and use as my life reference without having to constantly take photos of myself. Okay, but to start off, I'm going to go ahead and let's do a standard side, and then let's do a side, a straight on photo of the head, and kind of talk about how we kind of learn when you first get started drawing. Let me see if there's any questions here. Oh, you know what? As always, I always forget to change the Twitch stream name. 1 second. So yeah, I hope you guys are having a good Wednesday, February the 1st. Done. All right, let's see what questions we got here. Tigel says, a long time ago, I remember you talking in a stream about an anatomy dummy that you wanted from an online shop. I really want one, but I can't remember which one it was. Any idea, or was your memory as horrible as mine? I do have probably the worst memory of anyone I know, but there are some online. Oh, geez. I might have to post them after the stream so I can find them. There's one in particular that a lot of my friends use for anatomy referencing. So I'll post that one. It's like CG Poser or something. I'll have to send you the actual link, though. Okay, let's go ahead and do this. So when you first get started learning how to draw the head and doing it in proportion, this is usually what you learn. So you draw a circle, you extend it down, and essentially you create a chin line. Now, there's a lot of different ways to getting to here. There's like so many artists that will say, well, it's not a perfect circle. Usually you have to cut the sides off because our head isn't a perfect circle. It's actually more flat on the sides, which is correct. But then to get down here, you would connect. There are so many proportion things that you learn, and I feel like they're almost making this weird structure where if you don't follow it, you're doing it incorrect. So I think it's good to understand why they're teaching you this first before accepting this as like fact, and this is the only way you can draw a head. Because I don't think this is the only way you can draw a head. Now, essentially, at the top of the forehead to the bottom of the chin, this one I do agree with, though. Basically, it can be broken down into 3 sections. And that's at the top of the forehead. And if you break this down into 3 sections, the first line will be our eyebrow line. The second line will be the bottom of the nose. And the last line is the bottom of the chin. Now, the reason that this one I do agree with is because typically people have the same sized regions from the forehead to the eyebrow line, to the eyebrow line, to the bottom of the nose, and the bottom of the nose to the bottom of the chin. Generally, these are relatively the same. So I think this one's good for an artist to kind of keep in the back of their mind while they're drawing ahead. That way, if one looks really wonky, it might be because one is too stretched or too short. Now, obviously, this doesn't apply to everyone, as some people have really long faces where maybe their chin is just very short, but they have a very long, extended forehead. So it varies with every person, but this is just a good general rule to follow. And then from here, the other rule that I do like is wherever you draw your eye. Now I'm going to draw a very basic looking head. I'm not going to try to add my style in it very much. Well, I thank you, Eric Spa, for following. So essentially, when you draw the eyes on the face, the middle of the pupil, if you follow all the way, if you go straight down, let me zoom in a little bit for you guys. So if you go straight line, essentially this should be the corner of the mouth. And that's where, right here. So if you follow the pupil straight down, that's where the corner of the mouth should be. Now, once again, that varies per person, but general rule here. Oops, let me get this out of the way. Actually, I drew his eyes kind of high. The eyes should be more in the middle. I don't know why I drew them so high. Because the other one that you usually follow is the eyes are in the center of this kind of middle pocket here. I think naturally I like to draw my eyes higher because I like having a low brow set, but typically the eyes are more in the center. Something like that. Oops. Then from here, you can kind of block out the rest of the shapes. And then the last general rule that I actually do really like is the ear will be also within the confines of the second little realm here. So in this realm, we have the nose and the ear, which you might not know this either. They're generally the same size and length. So the ear would also be, let me put on this side. Roughly right there. Now, when you get a straight on version of the ear, you usually don't see as much detail because usually they're more in view when you have more of a side view. Now, like I said, I'm drawing a very basic looking head. I'm not trying to apply my style as much as I normally would. The neck is usually thicker than you might think. And that's where the traps or the muscles that connect your neck to the top of the torso align. So it looks something like this. And there are so many other things that are taught when doing a very rigid look at drawing a head. And I think some of them stuck with me, but for the most part, I try to be more fluid in the way that I adapt the face from reference to a drawing. But I think it's good, like I said, to understand this. So now from the side, let's just carry those lines over. Oh, we got a question too. Beck's Creation says, what college did you go to, if you don't mind me asking? I actually went to the Art Institute in Schaumburg, Illinois. And it's one of those experiences that you hear with a lot of artists where the quality of education I didn't think was as high as the experience I had overall with meeting the people that I met and just the peers that I had alone, I felt like taught me so much. And I'm so grateful for some of the friends I made because they were friends that I'll have for life. So I don't regret my college experience at all, but I definitely think if you want to learn something, you can do it online. Like literally every education thing that you want that an art school could provide is also online. And that's one of the things that CG Cookie provides. But even when I was in school, I was looking at YouTube videos. I was looking at DeviantArt tutorials and step-by-steps. I was just Googling. I was using Pinterest a lot. I was one of the first people that actually like backed Pinterest when it was still being made fun of as like a cooking and fashion kind of site. But I was like, no, this is a great site for artists using reference. Like, you should really check into this. Okay, so now from the side view, some of the same theories apply with the front view, but now I usually do start all my heads with a circle. The forehead, like we said, would be captured within this first plane, eyebrow. And now the angles at which you're drawing all the slopes, I mean, that just depends on what you want the character to look like in the end and what head shape you're going for. And for me, what I'm trying to do, actually, you know what? I'm going to try to match up this kind of basic head that we have over here. Go for a very kind of strong chin on this male character. So now, usually when doing this kind of line silhouette for the side of the head, I like to keep in mind how it's going to look in different angles. So for this one, he has a very prominent nose and a very prominent chin. And then when I draw this from the front view or from any other angle, I got to keep those in mind, that those are very prominent features that this character has. Eyebrow would line on that first line. This is the first line. I guess this would be the first line. This would be second. The nostril would kind of be right on that top of the third line. The mouth is generally in between the third and fourth line as well. Usually the cut where your mouth actually opens would be in the center, kind of like how the eye is in the center of 2 and 3. But I actually have mine a little higher up, which is okay because the face does vary a little bit per person. Now, the funny thing with a side profile that a lot of artists draw very strange is they put the ear kind of close up to the front of the head. But really, if you look at a side profile of someone, their ear is actually pushed really far back, and there's a lot of face that isn't drawn, and I think that needs to be accounted for. So instead of it being near the center, push it really far back. I used to almost just push it further than I would normally as like a safeguard to make sure that I was pushing it far back enough. Because I was one of those artists that did put it a bit too close for the longest time. Head will kind of come around the back. Now the other thing that you should know about the head is when coming around into the back, it's not a perfect round shape, or at least it normally isn't. You see some people, a bald person that has like a perfectly shaped back of the head. It's very rare, but it looks very nice. But for the most part, we have these very awkward looking skull shapes. Why, thank you, Sephiroth Power. I don't know why I read that wrong at first, but thank you for following. So instead, I like to flatten out the back of the head and give more of a lumpy appearance because the skin is laying on top of our skull, and our skull isn't a perfect round shape either. It's not even a perfect egg. If anything, it's just very lumpy and has these weird bumps and grooves throughout the skull. So I think that should be represented when you draw it. And then, like I said, the ear is about the size of the span between 2 and 3. Then I always draw my hook, my bump, and there's a wall, the letter Y in there. That's how I always know how to draw my ears. Oops, something like that. So like I said, this is a very basic way of drawing a guy. Let me go ahead and now show you how I've learned to draw more of a head structure. Now, there's nothing wrong with doing it more structured and rigid. I think this is good as like a first learning experience, but as you continue, I think it's good to kind of branch out with other techniques. So let me go ahead and show. I'm going to take a few pictures of myself in different poses. If there's one that you really want to see, like I don't know if there's like a underneath or a very strange angle that you never see drawn as much. If you would like to see that, let me know in the comments before I take these pictures and I will do that. I'm going to take, I think, 3 of myself. I will draw that. And then from there, I'm going to show you how to translate a reference that you take of yourself into a whole different character. Because you might be thinking, well, yeah, I want to take reference of myself, but I need to draw a character that's kind of the opposite of me. I'll show you how to do that. And while I'm doing that, let me see what questions we got here. Beck's Creation says, thank you. That's very similar to how I feel about my college experience. That's how I feel like most artists that I talk to feel about their college experience, where maybe the quality was more poor, but the experience they had was a great one with the people that they met, and they don't regret it for that reason. But the price tag on a lot of these colleges is far too expensive for an artist that is graduating. I think to have that on their shoulders is I'll just say ridiculous. Just Call Me Clarissa says, any other pages besides Pinterest that you'd recommend for art tips or reference? Pinterest is my number one, I would definitely say, but I get even inspired by, honestly, Instagram when I follow a bunch of these artists that I respect. And like every day, I feel like I'm getting a daily dose of inspiration from seeing what they're doing or what they're exploring. So I think as long as you're current with the art world and you have an interest in kind of the unknown, I think you'll be fine. Eve says, hey, Tim, how are you doing? Did you have a chance to look at my portfolio yet? I am doing that this weekend. I have set some time for myself since I've been crazy busy, and then I gave myself kind of a break with playing the video game over the weekend. So now I'm going to get back into my real life messages. I think I have 44 just on my Instagram and Facebook page that I need to get back onto. So I think that's another thing that you guys should know is if you try messaging an artist, if they have any kind of a following, I promise you're not the only one. So if they don't respond right away, I know I'm worse than probably most people, but just if they don't respond right away or if it takes them a while, just understand that they're probably coming from their own personal stress along with work stress, and then having to communicate on top of that. It's just sometimes a lot. But obviously for you, Eve, I'm going to do it. George 45 Andre says, I sometimes have trouble with placing the iris in the pupils. Like, are they not looking in the same direction? Any tips? Yes, I can definitely show you how to draw the eyes to make sure they're looking in the same direction. Actually, while I'm looking for you guys to answer that, what head pose you would want. So let's say, what pose would it? Wonder if I have a drawing. Okay. So let's say this is these are Red's older brothers. I was just drawing in the car. So this is the brother that's just slightly older than her. So let's say we wanted to make sure that he's looking in the right direction on both eyes. And let's put him looking maybe not straight on. Let's have him looking just slightly to the left. I guess to his right, but on our viewing angle, left. So when drawing the eye, understand that the eyeball, there are 2 spheres essentially. And the way that they work is they allow us to see perception of depth. Now, with this eye, let's say that we're looking at an object over here, and both these eyes need to be looking at that. The eye that is furthest away, if they're really looking at like something over in the other direction, oftentimes this one will appear to be looking more at the object, so you'll see more of the cornea, the white of the eye, than this eye, because this eye, it's almost looking straight forward, but just slightly to the right. But this eye, if you're not turning your head, you really kind of have to turn it. And it's a very slight variation. I wouldn't say it's anything that you really have to like adjust crazy, but there is just like a slight little nuance that you should pick up on. So in this case, my little messy irises and eyes here. I always just try to have the eyelid that's covering the eyeball, make sure it's a little higher up wherever the iris and the pupil circles are. Because if you look at a side view of an eyeball, it actually bubbles out kind of like a contact on top of the eye, and the iris is more set in and the pupil is inset as well. So if you have this layer of skin on top of it, it usually will create kind of a bump when looking straight on, and it'll be like the highest point of where the eye point is. It's very, very subtle. It's usually one that's not so noticeable, but as an artist, you usually do notice these subtleties. So like here, before it was kind of lower, so I lifted that line here to kind of give more prominent or more focus to the fact that his eye is looking in that direction. And even, I know this is going to sound weird, but if you record yourself looking at a video camera and then just move your eye from the left to the right and then do it very slow, you'll see how the skin slightly will go up and down based on the iris and where it lands on your face. So it's one of those little weird experiments that I would actually recommend doing as an artist, just so you can kind of pick up on, oh, I guess I do see how the skin moves around the eye, and it's probably one of those things you wouldn't notice on a regular basis, but if you really study things like this, you start to notice these weird nuances that not only can you talk about when doing live streams about drawing the head, but when you're drawing your own characters, you can have that knowledge with you if you have your character looking in different directions, especially if they're like looking like up or down, and you can really push the skin around the eyeball because your iris, that little contact, is pushing right up against that skin. Something to keep in mind. Okay, the crow says they want top down. I can definitely do that. Eve says, awesome, thank you so much for taking a look at it. You are welcome. I'm glad that you're kind of building your portfolio up. Death Hollow 13 says, I love you, Purple Heart. Well, I love you too. You get a fridge from me. And then Christy McVie says, how about some extreme neck stretching, like having the head drastically turn somehow, showing how the neck responds? Yes. And then Rich1220 says, could you also try an extreme 3/4 view? I have a hard time trying the other eye that's less visible. Okay. So let's see. The first one was top down. Now, like I said, I always recommend using yourself as your own reference. So I'm going to go ahead and take a couple photos of myself quick. The first one's top down. I want to make sure I do this right. Almost. Let me try that again. All right, that's better. And then what was the second one? Some extreme neck stretching. Okay. So if you want the neck to be, I think it's always cool to show the prominent neck muscles, especially like near the collarbone. So let me go ahead and I'm going to turn it my head, I think. Okay, yeah, that gave me some good extension on the muscle. And what was the third one? Extreme 3/4 view. Oh yeah, with the other eye that's less visible. So it would be, I would say this is actually my favorite view to do. I almost overuse it nowadays. No, that one won't work. No, I don't like that one either. All right, that will do. All right. So let's see here. First one is our top-down view. So basically, I have just a mess of hair on the top of my head. So I'm going to just quickly draw what that looks like. Well, let me put this over here. I'm going to put the chat right above where I'm drawing. And then this one here. All right. So when I'm drawing the head, I know in my head. Why, thank you, the Krypton Man 229 for following. Or 299, I'm sorry. I kind of know that the shape that I draw it, some artists like to draw it in boxes. Kim Jong-gi is one of those that has a very shape-oriented mindset when drawing characters and people. I think for me, I have kind of a rounded square, I guess, but I always like to start with a circle. I don't know if it's just a comfort thing. I just like having something to build on top of. It's like a starting foundation, even though a lot of the times I don't even use it as like the outline of any shape of the head, but it's just something to draw on top of. Okay. Actually, I'm going to make this a little bigger so you guys can see this. And for those of you that are wondering, I am just using a normal Bic 0.7 millimeter pencil, and I have my kneaded eraser stuck on it. And you don't need any fancy tools to draw. You get this ones that you find at your office supply store. So the one thing that you do want to make prominent, why thank you, AWICD, for following. I don't know how you would pronounce that. Oops. Do you see this right now? I got Sean Price calling me during my own live stream. He's my new roommate moving in 2 weeks. And he is also a great artist who's one of the judges on the contest. I don't know why he would call me at this time. He knows I stream. I'm going to have a talk with him later. But essentially, when drawing the top of the head, you want to pull it back a bit. So draw it taller. In my case, I just have a bunch of this curly mop hair everywhere. And it'll fall down a bit here. And then I'm getting a glare on my screen. Okay, so it'll be a little thinner when looking at the top. The one thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to be like very soft with the way you're approaching this, or like almost timid or scared. Really be bold and like have the nose be shooting out, because if you're looking at a top-down view, the nose would be very prominent and it would be kind of pushing forward here. And even I don't really have that big of a, I don't have a very prominent nose. I've been told I have more of a feminine looking nose just because it's smaller and round. But even mine will push out from a top-down view and you'll see it jutting out. And you probably won't even see any of the lip features or the chin, especially if you have a head like mine where it's kind of recessed. So the forehead, the eye region, and the nose, and kind of the top of the cheek, that's the only place that's going to be visible, especially on our drawing. So in here, I can see my eyebrows. Jutting out there. And I just have a few little hints of an eyelash. Now, mind you, I'm going to try to work a little faster with these just so that I can fit everything that I want to with this live stream. I can see the top of my ears in the center. And honestly, it wouldn't be too much different than that. I mean, I guess I could draw a little outline of my shoulder so we get more inclination of the angle that I'm drawing this at. Got that red hoodie on. And the strings are just kind of hanging down. Something like that. Now, hold on. I'm going to look straight down because I'm drawing at kind of an angle here. This one's actually even more of a cut. I have bigger cheeks, so they're kind of sticking out here. I want to make sure that I capture that. And a lot of times doing weird angles like this will look very strange, especially when looking at it after drawing like a normal looking head. It'll look very strange doing very extreme angles. And then I just have a bunch of hair up here. All right. So that one, you probably won't have to draw too much in your career as an artist unless you do a lot of extreme angles is kind of your thing. But the way that we're doing this, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next, which was the necklines and having kind of a twist of the neck. Actually, you know what? I didn't push. You probably wanted more of a turn of the neck so you could actually start seeing the wrinkles. Yeah, let me redo that photo so I can get more of those wrinkles. Yeah, that'll work. All right. Oh, great. Now I got the sun beaming in my eye, too. First Sean calling for no reason, and now we got the sun messing with me. What's going on today, guys? What's going on? All right, let's see. CG Rifter says we forgive Sean. Do we? I think we need to take a vote. I don't know if we forgive him on that one. Tijol says, if you want reference of a longer, slender neck with prominent collarbones, let me know. I can quickly take a picture. Actually, I mean, Tijol, if you want to be the reference, you can send me one quickly, and I will use you for this one. Because right now, I'm not getting the wrinkles that I want, and I think if I wanted to take a proper picture, I would need to see a better camera than the one that I'm using here. Then I will skip then onto, what was my third one? Oh, the extreme 3/4, which is admittedly probably a comfort zone for me because I've kind of overused this one. It's become a joke with my roommates. But I will show you how I do it. And Tijol says, Art of Price messing up the stream because he's salty that he's not in the fridge yet. Where did you get that salt emoji? Oh, that's wonderful. Does it work when I do it or no? Oh, it does. Yeah, that's wonderful. I like that one. Okay. So doing a 3/4 view. Like I said, I always start with the circle. Now this one, I would say, comes more from me doing it so often. I kind of have memorized where to place things. But some artists, when they're drawing, they kind of create like this very front plane mask where all the facial features are kind of on the same front plane, essentially. I think I get in trouble with that, though, because then I start drawing the front of the face too flat. But I do understand that a lot of the prominent features of the face are on the front plane of the head. And then when you're moving it, it's a way to make sure that it's staying on the front of the head rather than having like the features start to kind of merge into the side of the head. You keep it front. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm going to try to be more fluid with this one. I've been very rigid up until this point. So having lines that aren't so rough and dark, I like to be a little more soft when I'm doing this stage. Because the great thing with pencil is that you can erase it. So I don't feel like I'm committing to any sharp line right away. So when I'm doing this kind of a head structure, I'm not thinking about how structurally accurate this is. I'm looking at the reference. I'm looking at where the shadow placements are. I'm thinking about the muscles underneath the skin. I'm looking at what makes this head unique compared to a very standard head. Like I would say, more soft features. I don't have these very prominent like jaw lines or sharp angles. And I would say the only angle I have is when I go in a side view. My nose is more of a triangle, but from the front, it's a very button-looking nose. So I want to capture more of a softness when I do someone that has a similar head shape like mine, and capture the whole idea that this head isn't this very superhero-looking structured head. Got my mop of hair up here. And when I do the outline of the hair, I try to always do this secondary little triangle here. I think this is a very important little part of heads that help you line up how everything fits. I think if you took that line out, it would make the head look very incomplete. And when doing a sideburn line, always push it a little in front of the ear. I think too many artists are pushing it like right up against the ear, but give it some breathing room. Like even the ear that I've drawn here, it could actually be pushed even further back. Remember when I talked earlier about how you always want to push the ear a little farther back than you might normally would? Or at least that's always been a tip that's helped me with drawing heads, just because I draw them so close to the eyes, but in reality, there's a lot of skin in between the ears and the eye. I re-add the back of the headline there. And then the mouth. I don't know why I usually save the mouth for last, and I shouldn't. I should have that be part of the flow. I try not to exclude a facial feature. I would say I've gotten better with it, but for some reason the mouth has always been a weird one for me. Thank you, Topo805, for following. Now, when drawing the other eye on the other side of this nose ridge here, I'm going to actually raise it just a touch. The thing that you don't want to do is have this line here just like connect and create like this weird almost circle feature. A lot of the times the area underneath of our eye is more recessed, especially near the bottom of the eye socket of your skull. It's pushed in more, so when you're drawing it, it would actually go down, and the nose will cover the cheek on where it kind of connects back out. So usually when drawing in this kind of a weird perspective, or this kind of a 3/4 but even more so turned, it's okay if these lines don't look like they're going to match up, because on the other side of the nose is where that magic's happening, where the cheek then goes, it gets pulled back into the recessed eye pocket, or eye socket, eye pocket, and that's where you'll break your realism if you try to make it look like they connect outside of here. Just push it back, because behind the nose it would look like this. The line would connect probably around there. All right, but let me get into a little further detailing here so that you can go, I can show you on how you would do this next. Like, where would you go from here? So probably I like starting with the eyebrows. I think it's one of my favorite areas to start off. A welcome key. Then eyes are my favorite thing to draw, so I usually move down to the eye area. Now this goes back to where do I draw the iris and the pupil. And you know what, maybe I'll have both eyes kind of outlined first before I do that. Because one of the biggest mistakes that I see artists get into is they draw one eye perfectly, and then the other side is blank, and then there's this weird, overwhelming, intimidating feeling, and then they cannot draw the other eye for the life of them. I only say that because I've caught myself in that jam many a time. So let's draw this other eye. And when drawing the eye on the other side, remember that it is a sphere and it's not this flat surface. When you're drawing it, you want the skin to wrap around the eye as if it's this round spherical object. Otherwise, that's when I see a lot of eyes that are on the other side of a 3/4 head look very strange. Okay, we got some eyelashes. Okay, so now placement of the iris and pupil. So you'll definitely be able to see more of the iris and the pupil on this side. But when you're drawing the pupil, don't put it in the very center, because since we're looking at the eye from more of a side view, the pupil is actually pushed into the iris a bit. So I'm going to push the pupil back to about here and create more of an oval, more of an ellipse. And for the other side, I want the same thing. So I'm going to really push it back into the iris here. Like that. That way it looks like they're looking at the same thing. And like I said, if the object is if it's closer to what you're looking at, the eyes will be a little closer to one another in the angle. If it's farther away, they tend to straighten out just a little bit. And as they come closer, that's when you get the cross-eye look. And as you get further away, they start to spread out just a touch. So in this one, you can kind of see that he's looking somewhat farther away, but still close enough where the eyes still have a little bit of the coming together effect. Lady Raven says, looks like you need some blinds. Yes. Yes, I do. CG Rifter Z says, have you done a character in single point perspective? Yes. I would say a lot of the characters I draw are more orthographic view than perspective. Recently, I've been getting into more perspective, but I do like having, I don't know if it's creative freedom or it's lazy, but I like having the look of the character to be more aesthetically pleasing than structurally accurate. Well, I thank you, Altier. Oh, I missed it. I'm sorry, but thank you for following. Forgot the other eyebrow. And I have these very demanding eyebrows that always look like they're judging something, unfortunately. Yeah, I'm not going to detail the hair too much. But usually when doing the structure of the face, you'll see sometimes people add in like little implication lines of like the cheekbone or the muscles underneath. Sometimes I'll throw those on even when I'm like doing my pre-sketch, just to get a better idea of like where are these shadows falling, what lines am I looking for? Because the more lines that you give yourself as a foundation, the more that you can darken the ones that are working and then erase the ones that aren't, or even just leave them for whoever's looking at your art to see kind of your preliminary sketch and where your mind went and what worked and what didn't. I don't want to get too much into shading, so I'm not going to shade this out too much further. But I'll at least outline the prominent areas. So then when doing lips, especially on a guy, I get a lot of people asking, how do you draw lips on a guy without it looking like lipstick or lip gloss? And the way that I do it is keep it minimal and have the line be the darkest where the actual mouth opens. So right here, and then I'll usually leave the area in between the pocket of the mouth and the front more blank, and then I'll make it heavier in the pocket. Something like that. You can see the effect that it gives. It still gives the idea of the mouth, but it's not very heavy. Maybe I'll draw on the upper lip slightly darker, but for the most part, I'm not going to be touching it too much. And I think the easiest way to avoid it looking like a sheen or a glossy effect is to avoid adding highlights or having high contrast on the lips. But if you're doing hyper realism, especially if you do like a portrait of anyone in hyper realism, there'll definitely be some highlights on the lips depending on the lighting. But for the most part, you will get that. And with a hyper realistic artist, they can capture the colors within the entire face to make the lip color look natural. Because otherwise, it would look like lipstick. But if they're adding a bunch of skin colors and the little nuance colors like the greens and the blues and the yellows that most people don't add to their skin color, and I'm talking more for a Caucasian skin, then you won't be able to pick up the difference between the lip and the skin, and you'll just see like these blinding kind of purple lips or pink lips, and that's what makes them look almost animated or cartoony. And if you don't want it to look that way, just be more subtle with it and kind of build it up slowly. All right, and then as I'm finishing this one up, I'll wait for Tijal to send me. Why don't you just send it to me on Messenger, and then I'll get it there. Okay. And usually with the nose, I like to have fun with the nose. Sometimes I'll make the top of the nose more heavy or the bottom, but usually there's a difference in the values. So like in this case, let's just do a heavier bottom value. And if I really wanted to shade it out, I like to do a kind of gradual build up on any form that I do. And I think that's why sometimes drawing takes me longer, is just because I enjoy the process of building up values. So the nose might look something like this. And I would just work it that way. Actually, when I look kind of straight down at the image, I can see that this eye is too low and it should be like up a bit. But I was drawing at an angle where to me it looks right, but I always forget that you got to look at it straight on, otherwise the perspective gets warped. Okay, so it would look something like this. And then when I think of the eye socket, I always try to give some influence to show that the sockets are recessed underneath the eyebrow. So it could be making it slightly darker under here. Then when it gets to the nose of the bridge, or the nose bridge, it interacts with the shadow play there. Actually, I'm not giving myself enough credit on the chin. Mine's a little bit bigger than that. Not by much, though, let's be honest. Then I'll go through and I'll usually look at the values on the reference and be like, okay, which ones do I think would add to the picture? Which one do I think isn't as necessary? And I'll kind of work that way. So this is working more at a 3/4 angle. And always keep in mind where your center line is. So on this face, it would go down the center here. I think part of the problem with artist drawing in this kind of perspective or this viewing angle is the sides don't feel like they match up. And like even here, I can tell that this eye is more recessed than this one. So if I wanted to redraw this, I would probably, or even I could just push it out here like that. To give more of that recessed feeling there. Okay, let's see here. Avery Lana Art says, if a female wanted to draw a male character but you use yourself as a reference, how do you go about doing that? I am going to show you that because I'm going to do, what character should I do? I'll do my character Tracy, and she has very long hair. She's more of a sensual character. So I'll show you how you can take a reference picture of yourself and then turn it into the character just based on the proportions in the reference that you're giving for yourself. Oh yeah, everyone's saying it looks like Teen Tim. Yeah, it does look like a younger Tim. I think the eye placement really throws it off. It's way too low now that I'm looking at it. Toby Fox Art says, "Do you have any tips for drawing androgynous characters?" Oh yeah, I would say most of my characters are more androgynous than I draw. I would say the biggest thing that people imply with male versus female characters are usually male have more rigid and squared off shapes, and then females have more softer, round, curvier shapes. So the way that I like to work with them is combine it. So the characters I like to have usually a combination of soft features, yet more squared off in certain areas. So their jaw might be a softer jaw, like on their chin area, but then where it comes back underneath here near the neck, it's more squared off. And I think to have more of that androgynous look, if you're drawing a character or if you're drawing a female, just throw in a few more harder squared off shapes. And if you want more of an androgynous male, throw in some softer features. And I think that's the best way to capture that. Okay, while I'm waiting on Tigel to send me his picture. Oh, I think he just did. Wow, that was really good timing, Tigel. Oh, this is great. I'm going to use your second picture. Let me show you guys what he sent me. You even did it black and white. Look at you being professional. Okay. Where's my share screen? There we go. Okay, so this is what Tigel sent me. I'm going to be working with the second one because this has the most prominent neck area. And I think that would be more so what the request was asking for. Okay, so I'm going to pull up the image here. All right, why don't I draw... Actually, I'm going to do this on a new page. Okay, we'll make sure you guys can see this. So let me answer one more question before we get started. Kikoska says, since you keep repeating how everyone says you have feminine features, making a female character out of your reference photos feels like cheating. Yeah, I got a leg up on the competition apparently. Well, thank you, Stuart Doodles, for following. I would say that's maybe why I struggle with drawing more masculine characters, because I can't use myself as a reference as much, and that's where I'll use Pinterest or I'll kind of scour the internet for those harder edges and the typically more considered masculine features. All right, so Tigel, as always, start with the circle. Now, I'm going to go for a slightly more classical trained version on how to do this one too. So usually they do like what direction, the viewing direction is the character looking in. So in this case, Tigel's looking this way. So this kind of represents that center line of the face. Now, like I said, there is no right way to draw a face. It just depends on what you're comfortable with and what you find works for you. That's why I try to explore a bunch of different options on how to draw faces and kind of share with you guys a few different ones. Thank you, Mento XXX, for following. So that maybe one will stick with you and maybe one you've never heard or tried before and you're like, oh, let me try that. And maybe that will benefit you. Okay, I'm going to actually make it a touch lighter. All right, and the way that I'm going to do Tigel's face is I'm going to do it more of my life drawing way of doing it, where I keep the lines more fluid. I'm looking for different little anchor points in the drawing I can work off of. He has this big coif of hair at the top. You gotta capture that. And then when I go into the face, I'll just kind of block out the general area. Well, thank you, Red Pool 87, for following. So his eye socket has roughly there. You can see how none of this is looking 100% accurate, and it almost looks like a small scribbling to an extent, but you'll see how that starts to help me as this almost just lays down a foundation to work from. So then I'll pull out the lines that are working, and then I'll just leave the lines that aren't, this very light, untouched hardness that I'm laying down. All right, now he has these very prominent neck features. I think I'm going to focus on that after I get the head more done, just so that I can show you guys how the neck stretches and why those muscles in the area underneath the skin is so important to capture. Otherwise, I think it will leave your drawing looking a bit lifeless, especially if they have more of a thin, slender frame. Then you'll definitely be able to see those features pop out even further. Faithful Imagination says, I'm not sure why people think you look more feminine than masculine. I don't see it. No, I'll take what I can get. And then Tigel says, that'll be 3,000 euro. I did not know what I was paying for before I got the product. Actually, these are really good photos, though. Good job, Tigel. For having like a 5-minute deadline, that was very quick on the response. All right, so he has the same triangle hair thing that I was talking about here, where you want to push it. Oops. You have the line go out, kind of back toward the center of the face, and then back into the sideburn line. And the way that he shot this, he actually did more of a dramatic lighting, so you can really see the curves of the face easier because it looks like a spotlight. So when I'm doing something like this, a study like this, I like to actually draw the shadows. I think that helps imply the structure of the face. So even here, see the shadow comes down under the neck, hits the Adam's apple, goes over the bridge of the neck there. And this was a technique that I learned in college as well during my life drawing. It was the only thing I really took away from my college experience that I really thought pushed me in a way that I haven't been before was my life drawing session. And the techniques that I learned in there were ones that I never really used before. And this one was the idea of you only draw the shadows and then you fill in the shadow shape with the same value all the way throughout. And I thought that that was crazy that you needed this variation of values within the shadows to show off the forms of the what you were drawing. But I learned that if you keep it more flat in the shadows, more with almost a precision clarity, then it will really actually show off the forms better than if you just tried to shade it out. So even here on the side of the nose is that shadow. Tigel's actually got pretty prominent eyebrows as well. So they come up like that. Well, I thank you, Boxy, for following. All right, so his nose shape, Tigel has a longer nose, and since the photo is more from like below, it's slightly angled because he tilted his neck up, the nose is going to be slightly foreshortened, not by much, but a little bit. When I'm drawing it, like I said, you can't be sheepish when drawing faces in these kind of angles and perspective. Otherwise, it will just start to look wonky. So if the picture has a weird angle and it looks weird when you're drawing it, that's okay. because more than likely the end result should look a little wonky to capture that extreme angle. Right. And he also has very large lips. Now, usually when it comes to the human lips, the smaller one will be a little thinner than the bottom one. People tend to have more plump lower lips, but Tigil actually has, I would say, a large upper lip. So when drawing it, it's almost pushed up a bit and flattened. So it wouldn't create much of an undershadow as it would me just focusing on the line that separates where the mouth actually opens. Something like that. All right, now I'm going to focus more on the neck area because I know that's where the question wanted to go with how do I draw a more prominent neck. So, Digital, you have great eyes, but I can't draw them on the stream because we got to keep moving forward. Maybe I'll finish this later as like a thank you for taking these photos so fast. But let me focus on the neck region. Now, there's two muscles of the neck that actually start right below the ear. They come down your neck and then they don't quite connect, but they reach your collarbone right here. So they go across the side of your neck below your ear. So when people that have, I would say, longer and slender necks, you can definitely see these like two like spikes in the very front of their neck. And you want to capture those if you have a character that is more slender, because especially if they're doing a pose where their neck is tilted up, these will jut out more. So you want to showcase those to reflect that. Let me see if there's any questions to answer when we got this. Toby Fox Art says, can you recommend any portrait artists who inspire you? Ooh, Miles Johnson is the first one that came to mind. I think just because I get compared to his style a lot. I just love the way that I think he has a great imagination that he captures in his work. And it's a creative mind that I don't see too often with traditional work. A lot of the times it's more of like realism capturing, but I think he plays on the more surreal aspects of his work. There's another one that I would say recently really inspired me. Let me find his name. On Instagram, he's Tony Sketch A. I know this is probably the worst way to market it. I'll just write it here. Tony Sketch A. He does these fantastic renderings. Let me find. I mean, not only does he understand values in lighting, more so than I do, he really captures and plays with shadow effects. Like here's I know this is probably the worst way to, or maybe I'll do it here. Oh, there we go. So you can see how he does this technique where the shadow values will kind of be unison throughout. And it creates this very almost ethereal looking character in the end because the shadows should be darker, but he does it in a way that it almost turns the contrast over where it becomes almost lighter. And it just creates these very beautiful end results. And then when he does want to play with dark values, he gets it. Like he really understands his value scale and range. And even like the little nuances. Like if you look on the face, look how many curves and look at all those lines that represent the different directions and angles that the skin is going into. So I feel like I'm fanboying over him, but he was someone that I found late last year. And every post that he does, I just feel inspired by. And see, he's another artist that does these anatomy studies. I do think they're important. Well, I thank you, Loka Tika, for following. So don't underestimate the value of anatomy studying. It's very important for character artists. Anyways, and even, you know what? I'm going to switch to my 6B or my 2B. Looking at Tony's stuff and looking at mine, I'm like, I'm going way too light for a live stream. I should be going darker. Okay, so for the neck, this one is going to be the one on our right will be more prominent because his head's facing this direction. So this muscle is being pulled and pushed and being worked with more so than the line on this side. So instead, let me try to capture this. And I'm going to even play with the values a bit more than I did with the other ones. The camera might jiggle a little bit because it's on the same desk that I'm drawing this on. So I'll do my best not to jiggle it too much. Jiggle, jiggle. So even the area in light here, it's actually a light gray. So I want to capture that with this pencil. But if you go too dark, you might imply a rounder shape. So when you're rendering things out, you got to be very mindful of how hard you're pushing on the paper. Otherwise, you could create a very valued and jutted out shape that's actually probably more subtle. But with this one right here, it is very jutted out. So I want to reflect that here. Let's see. Oops. Let me look at the comments here. Gypsy says, Tigil, they're too great. Drawing them on stream would be irresponsible. I'm assuming there's a reference to a comment before. Let me find. Tigil says, yes, the dramatic lighting is thanks to my second light stand that's broken, so I only had one softbox. Well, yeah, the pictures turn out great, though. Chrissy McVie says, where can we find an anatomy reference? In a mirror. But in terms of like a book, the one that I really like is by an artist called Giovanni Savardi. Let me go grab it really quick from the library. Okay, so this is my favorite anatomy drawing book. It's called Drawing Human Anatomy by Giovanni Savardi. And as you can see, that the figures that he uses is not this superhero over musculature body, but instead more of a frail, thin, slender guy. And the way that he draws, you can see how he keeps it very much in two-tone, where, I guess it's three-tone, but the areas in light are very soft and he almost leaves them untouched. The areas in shadow are almost a consistent value throughout. And the way that he works the darkest areas is he punches up the value a bit more. And I love that. I think this is one of the reasons I draw in a very similar style where areas in light, I almost leave more open. It's more of like a negative space to play with. But then as soon as you get interactions with like shapes or like this vein, there's a vein right there and right there, you add that subtle hint of a value and immediately it adds more perception to what is going on with this figure. So this book is by far my favorite anatomy book. I mean, look at the way he captures the calf muscles here and how you can actually see the separation between the two muscle splits here. So yeah, this is definitely my number one recommended book. I actually don't like his other books as much as this one, but for some reason, I think this one I would recommend even over the ones that he has of like drawing the male or female nude. This one was the one that I would recommend most. All right. So let's keep going here. So when drawing the neck structures, I'm doing as much as I would love to do what Giovanni and Toby Fox does and keep the shadow value pretty consistent all the way throughout. I'm going to actually play with more of a realism and look at where areas are a bit darker and where they transition into the lighter areas. So as we get, there's the collarbone here. Let me capture that. And it's more of a subtle hint of one because this area is more in light. So the values won't be as drastic as the values over here where the light's not able to get behind. And then pretty much all the area in this neck area will be in light. So I could even erase a lot of this and let it be that negative space that I was talking about. And then this collarbone, it actually wraps to the edge. And sometimes, not all people have this. Tigil, you actually do have very prominent ones. It's like a little point that comes up, like pushes on the edge of the skin surface. Like that. And then right here is the top of the pectoral muscle. And I think when you're doing life drawings like this, really focus on the nuances. I promise you that is what really makes a character stand out as being more realistic versus being or reading more flat. And you don't have to be drastic with the way that you shade it. It can be very, very subtle, and it would make a really big impact. All right, and then the area over here, same thing. There's a point where that collarbone would go up, reach to the side of the skin, goes into the shoulder, and then he's pushing out the chest a little bit, so the arm right here would actually go behind the torso, and then most of this would just be in shadow. So I'm not gonna detail that out too much. What do we have? We got about a half hour left. I still want to show how to draw from reference and then turn it into a different character completely. So let me focus on the neck again. So there are some muscles that are seen even in the reference photo. It might be very subtle and there might not be like a giant bump, but you still want to give indication to it. So I like to go very light. Even like this side of the neck is a bit too dark. Something like that. And the area pretty much under his neck where the light isn't, or where that cast shadow is being casted from his head, it's actually very dark. It's like all of this could be rendered very dark. And the ear itself would also be in shadow. So I think as you start filling out these shadow shapes, you can see why a lot of artists like working with just drawing the shadows, because you can actually create a lot of form with just your placement of them. This is the loudest pencil, I swear. But then this neck muscle cuts into that shadow area, and that's why we get some of that light still being seen on the top of that muscle. Like that. So basically, when drawing any kind of neck muscle or any muscle that is pushed against the skin where you'd see some crazy, oh my gosh, this sun, it is like glaring at me. Wherever you see muscle areas, especially like on the corner of an arm or a forearm, really push up those values and make them known. Otherwise, it does start to read flat, and I promise your drawings will look so much more realistic and give so much more of a lifelike essence to it if you really push and put focus on them. Okay. So I think you guys kind of understand what I'm trying to say with this one. So for the last drawing, let's go ahead and I'll show you how to turn a reference of yourself into a character that maybe is the other gender or is some character that is kind of the opposite of you in build or attitude or anything that you might need. So Tracy, like I said, is a bit more promiscuous and a bit more of a, oh I'll say sultry. That's the word I'm going to use here. So let's see here. I'm going to take, let's do one where it's like the look down. It's like that very prominent, I would say you see this a lot more with like villains where they're doing like this look down at you and like their nose is like jutted up in the air. Their mouth is slightly open. So why don't we try something like that? We're going to do like a... Okay, that'll work. Oh, son. I love you, son, but I'm streaming. Okay. Let me switch back here. There we go. Nope. 1 second. There we go. Oh, that's why I turned off my little camera. Okay. So for this, let me do a quick sketch. Actually, you know what? I'll work with the 6B right now. I think it's good to keep myself on my toes. So I'm going to work with a pencil that I really haven't worked with this one in a while. I've been working more with the mechanical pencils recently. All right, and I think for the last technique that I'm going to show you guys is where you kind of etch out the different shapes or like do more of a rough block out. And I'm not going to start with my circle that I normally would. And just go from there. Angie Valda says, does it ever bother you when you get charcoal or graphite on the side of your hand, though? Have you figured out a good life hack to help not have that problem? I try to draw left to right, but my biggest thing is I get graphite like right on the corner of my pinky here. So what I'll usually do is just wipe it on my other hand, wipe it on my shorts, or if it's kind of more prominent, I'll actually like do a quick lick and then wipe, which I know is kind of gross, but it gets it off right away. Hold underscore that underscore thought. Thank you for following. So for this, I'm looking at the head shape. I know that there's going to be some foreshortening with the eyes and the nose, so they're going to be really close together in the drawing. And when I'm doing this, Tracy is definitely a strong female character. She's slender, though. And when I'm drawing this, I'm keeping her in mind the entire time. Because I got to remember that this is being turned into her. So I would say my jawline is a bit more prominent than hers, so I'm going to soften that up a touch. But I'm still using that initial reference as a placement then. So there's the eyebrows. Just start off, like I said, I'm going to block this out. Oh, let me get a bit closer for you guys. Then I'll go in and really detail it out. So right, even as I'm doing kind of these rough shape blockouts, there's some things that I'm shifting just a little bit either way. Like I definitely made the chin a bit softer. Now the ear placement's going to be everything when doing a head that is so foreshortened, because they're going to be lower and it's going to look really weird at first. Because it looks like they should be heightened, but until you kind of fill in the rest of the drawing, it's going to just stay very almost inaccurate looking, which is okay. All right, so that's kind of the general face that I have, I guess you would say. Actually, the top of the nose would be like right there. So then to go from this to Tracy, I'm going to first slim the neck up, make the jawline a little less than what we got here. I'm going to immediately push sort of this longer hair aesthetic. She has very long brown hair. And the first thing that I'm going to do on the face is kind of accentuate the eyes to make them look more like the character. And for my females, or whenever I draw females, I just tend to give them a bit of a darker lash line. Usually indicates more of makeup use or eyeliner. She actually wears this very heavy undercoat blue. So I'm going to make sure that's represented. And then draw her eyelashes where they're very prominent in this angle. Because if we're looking from underneath a bit, these would be jutting out and you'd see more of the underside. Where her bottom lashes, not as much. So I just used my head almost as like a foundation for the placement of things, but I need to use my sense of character creation to then take that knowledge and apply it toward this character here. I'm trying to think, which way do I pull Tracy's hair back? I think I pull it this way, actually. She has a much bigger upper lip than I do, so I'm going to accentuate that. She definitely doesn't have a gap tooth, so I'm going to erase that. Even though I actually really like gap teeth. I'm going to give her more of a shine on her lip as well. Thank you, Tenori, for following. To imply that lip gloss or that lipstick effect. And I usually do the corners of the mouth a bit darker, almost like a dot. And then usually with female characters, I try to keep their face a little less nuanced with these kind of sharper angles than a male character. With a male, I might really accentuate a cheekbone or a jawline. With her, I might give her a bit of a cheek line, or of a high cheekbone line, I should say, but not too much else. Why, thank you, Cornflakes123, for following. And, oh, that was too fast. Gratchik for following. I missed the second one in there, though. But thank you, guys. I'm sure she's wearing some kind of an earring. I'll give her like feather earrings or something. I'm not going to add in an Adam's apple to her. I think that would give her more of a male essence. So I'm going to actually not draw that at all. So it's one of those things where when you're looking at reference, if there's something on the reference that you know your character does not have, just leave it out completely. Don't feel like you have to add it just because your reference has it. You want to be accurate to the human form. Why, thank you, Adhesive Ghost, for following. Adhesive Ghost. And oh, wow. Thank you, Kusha Aura123 for following. Now, I did the mistake of kind of drawing one eye before going to the other eye, so why don't we fix that now? And the look that I wanted her to give, you don't want to like have the eyes open and be like, "Hi, nice to meet you." It should be more of like a, "It's your pleasure to meet me" kind of a look. So I'm going to lower the eyelid to cover half her iris more, and it just gives more of a almost intimidation stare. It's just a little less inviting. Like that. Something like that. And from here, I would go in and really look at where the head needs to give more push and pull. Because right now it's reading very almost flat. So I want to add more of a little life, like the upper eyelid implication. Let me see. Oh, you guys got a lot of comments. Gypsy Hummingbird says Tim sometimes uses $100 bills to protect his hand. That was a one-time thing. Just Call Me Clarissa says, could you put the name of the anatomy book you showed us in the community post? I certainly will. Tigel says the sun wants to stream in. That was pretty good. That's a good pun. But chew. Miss Chibi Artist says should have done a dramatic lighting stream today. LOL. Yeah, no kidding, right? The reference shot that I had actually. Let me show you it again. It's like, oop, not that one. That one. Like there's those lines going across my face, the window lines. Like I could have easily done some cool dramatic lighting with that and show you how to do that. Okay, now I might go back. Like there's some areas that I think are a bit either too pushed or pulled or not pulled enough. Like her bottom lip, I think should be pushed up a bit more. Something like that, and then just accentuate the cheekbones a bit more. So essentially you go from the original drawing or the original screenshot that I took myself to something more like this. Actually, her eyebrows aren't quite that thick. So like I have thicker eyebrows near the center. She does not, so I'm just going to make them a touch smaller like that. I think just not being afraid to edit. So use your reference as a guide, a visual guide, obviously, but then kind of take your own liberty with it to match whatever character you're really trying to create. Okay. I think that's it. So we're going to end the stream actually a little early today, just because I have to drive down to the cookie studio tonight. And I still got to pack up. But I want to thank you guys for coming to this live stream. And I feel like this was a good one for me to show you guys right now, because I've been more in a traditional kick and with drawing faces. So thank you again, CG Rifter Z, for suggesting this. And for those of you who captured my casual stream over the weekend, I'm probably going to be doing another one this weekend. It'll probably be either Saturday or Friday night. And I'm going to be continuing my line of been drawing my characters. I don't think I have any on me right now, but I've been doing the full body drawings of them. So I'm going to go ahead and continue that this weekend with another one. I think I'm going to do Nate and then possibly Tracy. So this character, you could see what she looks like in her full scantily clad outfit. And obviously the easiest way to go from male to female, if you're using a male reference, is to give it more feminine traits. I think on that note, we're going to call this one done. All right. Thank you guys again so much for coming to this live stream. Like I said, we do these every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central Time, and I usually post an hour or two before what we're going to do. I know we have I thank you, Saphirius, for following. We have a post below where it's a community suggestion, and if you have an idea for a stream that you would like to see me do, please put it on there. I actually do read them every week, and this week we actually grabbed one of them from that suggestion. So it's kind of a recap. This is what we did today. We kind of showed the neck on like a twisting position with the head, how to change a reference from male to female. I thought we were actually going to do more extreme angles than we did, but still good. We got the overhead where you see kind of the top with the nose jutting out, a 3/4 view and showing how the eye on the other side of the face, how to draw that, and then the very structured how to draw a head kind of 101, which I think is good to fundamentally understand, but then you got to take that knowledge and then apply it to your own style. So thank you guys again for coming. If you're interested in my sketchbook, the Kickstarter is still going throughout February, and that link's below. We have the contest going on for the Lemon Maid character where you can win some cool loot judged by 7 artists in the industry today. Well, thank you, Nearfi, for following. And let's see. I thank you, Deb DeFoto, for following. I think that's all the big news I had for you guys. I may ask you again on the community post if you could put things that you noticed when you were first learning digital art that helped you. Just as I'm creating these tutorial series, I really want to make sure that it is kind of the best that it can be for those just starting out in Photoshop. Okay, that's all I got. Thank you guys again for coming to this live stream, and hopefully you see you next week. And one more shout out to Digital. Thank you for sending me those photos on the drop of a dime. Those were great reference photos, so thank you. And thank you all for coming. All right. Bye, everyone. And you all get, let me see if I can fit it in. You all get a golden fridge from me today. Yeah, this was a good stream. All right. Bye, everyone. Bye. And bye, son. Goodbye. Bye. Bye, Key.